Good evening, TDN listeners and viewers of this week in interview. A very warm welcome to you to this episode of This Week in Interview. Good evening to my regular listeners. I always, look forward to spending this time with you and to tell you thank you for making this week in interview part of your weekly schedule. And if tonight is the first time that you're listening to this week in interview, welcome, welcome. I hope you like what you hear and you to become a regular listener. And if you're not able to listen live, of course, there's always the replay because it will be on This Week in Interview Facebook page, TDN's Facebook page. It's on YouTube, TDN Network 1, and so on, all the different streaming platforms. In Dominica, This Week in Interview is carried live on DigiPlay Channel 59 by RVR Jams online radio, and also in the Toronto area by SBE Online Radio, the carry this week in interview live. So good evening to you as well if you're listening through those media. And as always, I appreciate the management of those two media agencies carrying us live. So tonight we are going to be talking African. Um, you know, what do we think when we hear African? Who is an African? Like Peter Tosh says, once you're a black man, you're an African. But what is a black man? The US presidential race is heating up, and of course, Kamala Harris, the first woman of African descent, is on the ticket for president. She was on for vice president before, and there are questions for is she black? Is she black enough? What is it to be a black person? We'll explore all of those type of conversations, nuances, um, aspersions, if we want to call it that, with my guest. My guest tonight on this week in interview is Shekhem Nafaunkh. I know I butchered that, but he will tell us how to say it properly. And we are going to talk to him. He's an educator of African people and African history, but he is also focused not just on the history, but on present Africans and aspirations, future Africans. And when we say Africans, we refer to everyone who's of African heritage, whether they live on the continent or somewhere else on the globe. So I want you to share the live, let everybody know that we are live. This week in interview is live. Share the link, invite 5 people to join us because these conversations are very, very important. The more people who get the education and get the information is the better we would be at getting a movement going. And so I invite you to share the live. And I'm going to bring my guest on right after I take a quick break. I always give you a chance to, get your beverage, get your notebook, and so on. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with my guest, Shekhem. All right, so we're back. I hope you had that gave you enough chance to grab your favorite beverage, be it a cup of water or something more spicy. As I said before the break, my guest tonight is Shekhem. I'm going to say Shekhem until he tells us how to say the last name. But he describes himself as a Pan-Africanist. But more importantly, he plays the role of an educator. He goes out and gives lectures and seminars on African history, African people, and so on. He's based in the UK, so we really appreciate him, making the time in his schedule because there's a 5 hour time difference between where I am in New York and where he is in the UK. And I'm not going to take more of the time, but I want to bring him up and say welcome to this week in interview. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Anthony. How you doing? Pleasure to be here.
I'm doing very well. Let's take care of preliminaries. Important preliminaries. How do you say the last name?
Nafaunkh Unnefa.
Nef'onk
Unnefa.
Unnefa. Nef'onk Unnefa. All right. And so since we're discussing that, um, let me just ask you about it, and then I'll have your opportunity to introduce yourself more properly, give a little background. But let's talk about
Sure,
the name, and I guess it can segue into that as well,
sure,
because
sure.
our name is a big part of our identity.
Absolutely.
What's in your name? How did you get to have that name?
Well, when I was living in Dominica, I round about 85, I no, round about 87, 87,
Hmm.
I went back to, I was born in England, I went back to England because I was born there, but I was living in Dominica for quite a while, since 72, thereabouts. So in about 87, I went back to England. And whilst I was there, I was getting involved in the Pan-African movement. I was listening, discussing, talking to people, and looking at all of the social issues that Black people were going through. One of the things that became very clear during the whole process was that through our history, we lost a sense of who we are, because part of the whole colonialism thing was that we had our names taken away from us and things of that nature. So what I did was that I was spending a lot of time with brothers and sisters who are a lot older than me, who were in that Pan African movement, and they had these names. So I thought, you know what, I need to change my name. The first name, actually, the name that I gave myself, which people call me to this day, is Kitwana. That's the first name I gave myself.
Hmm.
Obviously, in Africa, people have ceremonies when they do name. You don't just choose a name. But obviously, when you're in the situation where we were in England, we didn't have those kind of ceremonies. But we were Black people wanting to identify with our culture. So I just picked up an African names book, and I found this name called Kitwana in the first page I looked at. And since that day, people call me Kitwana. It's not my legal name, but people call me Kitwana because when I was born, I asked my mom, how did I get my names? The names that I had actually when I was born was Glenys Joseph Blanc. Now, Glenys is a Scottish name. Joseph is an English name. Blanc is a French name. And I thought to myself, well, hold on, I'm not English, Scottish, or French. So what am I doing with this name?
United Nations, right?
You understand? I thought to myself, I'm not English, Scottish, or French. And then I found out, my mom said to me, it was the nurse, more than likely a Scottish nurse, who actually gave her the names. So they went with it. So I thought that's not going to do. That's not going to do. So I got involved in the Pan African movement, and I joined an organization where I was looking for, through study and understanding history and culture and religion. I read history alongside religion. I don't read them separately because history tells you where things are. And I understood that I couldn't have an Islamic name because Islam was not an African religion. It couldn't be Christian because I knew what Christianity did to us. So I went look beyond that, and that's when I came up with I came up joined an organization, and from the time I joined this particular organization, the traditional African organization, I then was given a name through the proper process. I didn't just take a name. They went through a proper process of giving me this name. So that's how I ended up with the name that I've got.
So, and say it again. All.
So Nef'onk Unnefa. Now the first name Shekhem
Mhm.
actually is not my legal name, is Nef'onk Unnefa Chelem. There's another part to the name, but
Mhm.
my legal name is Nef'onk Unnefa. The word Shechem, actually, what that is, it's a title of a chief. If you go to traditional Africa, in villages, you have people who have particular titles. For example, in Ghana, the chiefs are called Nana. So when you hear somebody who's Nana, this and that, or Nana, they're called a chief. It's a title.
Mhm.
So in our organization, when you do a particular level of work and so on, you're given a chieftaincy title. So the word Shechem actually means chief. It's a chieftaincy title.
Okay.
It's a title.
Interesting. Hmm.
Legal name's a title. So people call me Shechem, and that is in my organization. So that is observing the fact that I'm a chief in my organization. So that's what the word Shechem means.
Right. And then the last name.
And then so Nef Nefer, it actually translates as I live as Osea the Great, because my religious tradition, I follow the ancient Egyptian. We don't say Egypt actually. That's what the Greeks said. We say Kemet or Kamau.
Okay,
So
okay,
that's I'll say, because for general purposes here, I'll say Egypt. So we follow that tradition, because Egypt, despite what anybody wants to say to you, Egypt was an African civilization. Hands down, it was an African civilization. So my religious practice follows that of Egypt, of the Egyptians. And we
okay.
have books on it, our religious books, everything, the text, a complete developmental program. And that's where the name comes from. So it's an ancient Egyptian name or Kemetic name.
Right. Okay. So as you said, well, we were in grammar school at the same time, secondary school
That's
at the
right, I
same
remember.
time, and,
Yeah.
and at the time we knew you as Glennis Blanc,
Yes.
and so I'm still known as Anthony Drago.
Yes.
Very few people know where Drago came from.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony comes from the fact that I was born in January and my mom was heavily Catholic, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the time period for Saint Anthony. So that's how the first name came about,
Yes.
and the last name, I I don't know, must be some slave master name or something from
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, right? But let's talk about that process of you getting that awareness to the point that you've even taken the steps to say, no, I want to identify myself differently.
Sure. Well, when you're getting this is all part of the our Pan African movement. When you're getting into Pan Africanism, one of the centerpieces of that is identity.
Hmm.
Very important to understand who you are, where it's identity. And the first thing about that is the name that you carry, because the name that you carry says a lot about you. Right? In African tradition, for example, you have these different names. My children have African names, because what did these names have meaning, and what they do is what we aim high. A lot of times these names are I am that with God. God is my light. That's what the meaning of the names are. Whereas when you look at English names, Mr. Baker, Mr. Blacksmith. Well, they were blacksmiths. Mr. Baker was probably a baker.
Professions,
And
yeah.
it's named on those professions. Whereas in African tradition, we name it after what we call the divine part of our being, the divine entity. So Osea in that tradition is what we call the God within. When you study Egyptian literature very, very carefully, they had a very, very complete spiritual system. So when I went amongst people who were Pan-Africanists, and we were spending, sitting and reasoning, discussing, reading all sorts of books, then you had a name to identify with that people would think, oh wow, your name has this meaning, and it's an African name, because it's about reclaiming your identity. That's what it's really about.
Right,
Reclaiming who you are, getting rid of the old slave name, and reclaiming who you are. That's what it's about.
right. And so that happened because you were fortunate enough to be positioned in the midst of people who understood that.
Well, it's interesting actually, because when I was living in Dominica before I left to go back to England,
Hmm.
I at that point I was slowly getting into it. I remember I was listening to Bob Marley's music one day, and I was listening
Hmm.
to some of the songs, and then I was listening to Peter Tosh, and I was hearing all of these songs that was coming up. The Bunny Wailer, the guys,
Hmm.
all those guys, the Bunny Wailers, and Peter Tosh, and
Jacob Miller,
Jacob Miller, Burning
Burning Spear.
Spear,
Yeah.
all of them, man. The Iroy, Uroy, and
Hmm.
all of those things there, and that music resonated very heavily with me. So I started that process. So when I went to England, actually, I used to spend a lot of time with Rastamen. When I went to England, that's where I used to spend a lot of my time. In centers where they were, we'd be sitting down reasoning about, Babylon system, and the culture in Africa. There's a lot of reasoning that was going on, and that's where I began to really get into the whole Pan-African thing, because I understood the history very well. And once you understand the history and you understand who you are and you understand the purpose of what you're doing, because what I'm doing is not just about just me having a name. It's about what my children will see, and they will then hopefully carry on whatever they're doing later on. It's about handing things down, but you got to start the process.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the Rastafarian movement,
Mm.
I don't think we appreciated how inspiring that movement was. We in the Caribbean, like sometimes you say you're in the forest, you're so close to the trees you cannot see the forest, or you're in the forest, all you see is the trees. So what we saw was young men rebelling against the system by not combing their hair, and a lot of them were vegetarian
Mhm.
and refusing to participate in society. I remember in Castlebrus, they would not ride on a vehicle. You know, they used to not eat salt. Definitely no meat and no tin stuff, and they were more interested in going closer to the ground.
Sure.
That part of it we were aware of. We were not so aware of the spiritual slash religious part of it.
Well, that
Mm.
is key.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
that
know,
is key. Yeah.
like Bob Marley is Bob Marley Peter Treasure has a song that goes, I am what I am,
That's Peter
I am.
Tosh. Peter
That's Peter
Tosh.
Tosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time we were just singing it, you know.
Yes.
But as you study more and more in terms of spirituality, you understand the significance of the term I am.
Absolutely.
And you wonder how enlightened and and conscious, if you want to say, and even the word conscious, which was a Rasta term, what they really mean about being conscious. Um, Now we have all of these gurus on the internet and so on that they're making millions from that kind of a thing, but we had it amongst us in the early 70s in terms of the Rasta movement. And I don't think we really under, understood or appreciated that aspect of Rastafarism as much as we should have, and maybe we missed an opportunity there because that movement could have taken the race a lot further than it has been.
Yeah.
You saying that you've been associated with Rasta in that vein, and in the religious slash spiritual vein, and studying and discussing. What are your comments based on that?
Well, I never actually became a Rastaman myself personally. I
Right. I
think
know. I
that
understood. That's what you
yeah,
said. Yeah.
it was it was like for me, it was like an avenue. It was like that door opened, and it was the only thing I saw that was Pan-African, that was talking about resistance and Babylon and all that kind of stuff there. When you're
Right.
young, you're getting into that kind of stuff. It's the
Right.
further you're getting into
Right.
it. You know,
Hmm.
I went to a couple of their Nabingis and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, so I didn't I didn't convert, but what I did, I sat down and reasoned with them. We studied and looked, you know, read different materials and stuff like that. And but what I tell you what I did take from them was the diet, because following I in 85 I became a vegan in 1985. That was following um, Dr. Sadie, who,
Hmm.
the gentleman who passed away recently,
Yeah.
or may have been taken out. We won't discuss that, but there's stuff there to talk about that, right? He came to Dominica, and one of the things he said, I remember him doing a talk. He said the talk was done at grammar school. I remember Glenn Etienne and a lot of them other man there what we had told me about it. So I came to the talk. So I heard what he said, and I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. So I did, and bearing in mind, imagine today I'm eating every different kind of meat, you name it, under the sun, everything I was eating, apart from sardines. Didn't like sardines,
Hmm.
right? But then after I heard his talk, then now I went home and I said, Mom, Dad, I'm not eating no more meat or no dairy food anymore. I cut everything out there and then, one time, cut
Wow.
it out
1985.
since 1985. So I wanted to find out if this.
Hmm.
So I thought to myself, we didn't have a lot of books in Dominica to read. You know, there was a frontline bookshop, I remember, but we didn't have a lot
Hmm.
of books.
Hmm.
So I figured if I'm going to do this, I'm going to adopt this. I want to try it myself. So I went home and I cut out everything one time. And I never looked back since 1985. And then now, when the Rastaman, Rastaman was talking vital, because right now they're talking plant-based, plant-based, plant-based. Hold on a minute. What they call plant-based now was vital back in the
Vital,
days.
vital. Yeah.
But it's always Europeans copy what we do and get some kind of fancy name. Well, we were talking vital way back in the days.
Right.
So it was from then, after becoming vegan and then sitting down and talking to Rastaman about vital, it was from there it grew. You see, that's it. But we certainly didn't. We certainly did miss. I would say we certainly did miss a trick with the Rastamans and what they were saying. You see, because a lot of people were not into what they say. I remember the time when government would want to do whole Rastaman down and cut their locks. I remember those days.
Yeah, they used to hunt them. They used to hunt them and kill them like wild goats.
Yeah, hunt them and cut their
And
hair. I remember
not cut their hair. They used to hunt them and kill them.
And kill them. You see,
yeah.
So we definitely missed something there. You see. But I didn't stay within the movement. I took that. What I did, I took what I felt was good from what they were talking about. Definitely around the light in terms of the vital lifestyle, the eating. I started that for 2 years. I was like from 85 until I left in 87. I was heavily on a vegan diet, and the Rastaman influenced that. When I got to England, I was able to further refine that diet even further because I had more literature available to me. I had more sources of stuff available to me. There was a lot more people into that type of lifestyle. There was a lot more access to stuff. So coming to England just widened the scope, and then it really helped to reinvigorate the mind.
Yeah.
So
what I liked, what attracted me to the Rasta movement. Like you, I was never a Rasta man. Well, in my mother's house, I couldn't be a Rasta man anyway. I probably wouldn't be here talking to you if I tried to put one single lock in my hair.
Yeah.
But what attracted me to them was that they did not try to assimilate into the system. They understood who they were as Africans and decided that was not for them, and they could create a life that was different for us as Black people, that was more suitable to Black people, and reject the system that enslaved us and the system that continued to oppress us. And that was very different from what the other movements turned into, where it was like, we want to sit at your table. To me, Rasta was saying, no, we don't want your table. We don't want a table. We want to sit down in a circle and commune and eat together as brothers. And that was a little heavy for a lot of folks. But that desire to assimilate into the Western culture, I think, has retarded the progress of the race. But that's my personal view. Sure. I want you to, before we come to the break, just do a little brief explanation of what is Pan-Africanism. What do you mean when you say you're a Pan-Africanist?
Well, to be a Pan-Africanist is to, first of all, it's about identity. I identify as an African. When I was in Dominica recently, somebody saw me and they said, "Oh, I think I might be interested in one of these tops," and so on. "Are you African or are you Dominican?" And I said, so I looked at them and I said, and 3 people asked me on 3 different days. I was like, and then I began to realize that there was this thing about not identifying with Africa. So I said to him, well, hold on, if it wasn't for Africa, you wouldn't be here. So for me, Pan-Africanism is about what you identify with in the movement towards us being able to regain our rightful place back in the world as we had at one point, where we ruled. Kings, queens, our history didn't begin with slavery. It began way, 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 way back. Further than that, history was slavery, so-called slavery was just along the way. So to be a Pan-Africanist is to identify culturally, spiritually, and historically with Africa, wherever you may be, wherever you might be living, right? And to be able to, number one, live a lifestyle and that exemplifies Pan-Africanism and Africa. Teach and to share those principles so that our children later on become those who will take our place. Because we're not going to be around forever. They will take our place and they will continue that movement towards what we call our liberation. And liberation, first of all, is mental, and then it becomes physical. Because if you don't mentally liberate, then the physical stuff ain't going to work.
which is what we're seeing in terms of the evidence
Yes,
that they took the chains off of us,
that's right.
and the whips were no longer visible. But I'm not sure that we are not just as bonded as we were before. Especially when you read um, the relationship that continues between European colonizers and
Hmm.
Africa, and
Absolutely.
European colonizers and their former colonies in the Americas and so on. So
Absolutely.
this is a perfect time to take a break, because when we come back, I want you to talk about the work that you do,
Hmm.
because I followed you a little bit, and I see that you do presentations to organizations, you do presentations to schools,
Sure.
and you also have products, at wearable, at you call it,
Yes.
that reflects the very thing that we're talking about. And in particular, you have a product that is intended to really catch the attention of young people while they're very small, and start to bend their thinking in that direction. So
Absolutely.
let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. My guest tonight is Shekhem, um, and we are talking African Pan-Africanism. Forgive me, I don't I rather not say the last name if I'm going to butcher it. But he's giving us his experience of being born and in UK, but his early years, uh, being in Dominica. I know him from grammar school. We were in grammar school at the same time, at secondary school, and going back to London, his journey, his spiritual journey, his physical journey, and now as an adult, his work in the field of educating our people, first of all, about their past, making them aware of where we as Africans are presently, and setting our eyes aspirationally into the future of what it is that we can achieve based on what we have achieved in the past. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll continue my conversation with Shekhem.
Presented by
A smart house run by a vengeful AI, a mute witness to an act of unspeakable evil. A breadfruit thief is haunted. A young man unwittingly creates a god. Giant crapos terrorize a community. A witch seeks revenge on her neighbors, and much more. The Piton Noir Writing Collective is thrilled to announce the release of the third book in their acclaimed anthology series, The Flying Crapo. Jumpstart your summer reading with The Flying Crapo, Heroes and Monsters. Now available for purchase on Amazon.com. Get your copy today and embark on a journey filled with heroes, monsters, and the magic of the Caribbean.
People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
How much Dominican history do you know? Want to learn some fun facts? We have a great and fun way to test your knowledge and learn more about our history. Get your copy of Dominic Anu, Dominica in Puzzle. Fun for the whole family. Available now on Amazon.com. Visit pushpast10.com to learn more. Email us at dominicainpuzzle@gmail.com or call 877-698-9894. Looking to promote your business, engage current customers, and reach new people? Well, look no further. From the basic presentation to a fully fledged advertisement, use your video ads to attract customers. At Man's Audiovisual Productions, we do just that. We produce videos for business and event promotions, product demo videos, animated explainer videos, fundraiser ads, and much, much more. Engage your clients and sell online. We customize the video to match your brand design. Guaranteed to play flawless on all devices, including smart TVs. Contact us at telephone number 203-690-4342 or 767-245-6238. Visit our website, mansaudiovisual.com, or email us at derekvideo@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, and thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate you. There's a couple things I want to, well, all of them basically I want to highlight, but you see that Flying Crapo 3, by the Flying Crapo 3, that anthology of work, tremendous. You want to get that book. And if you didn't get 1 and 2, you want to get 1 and 2. Just some really incredibly talented writers in there, and every story is different. Every story is equally fascinating and imaginative. But you read it and it's not. You almost forget that it's imaginative because the writers really draw you into the story. So I encourage you to get your copy of the Flying Grapple 3, and of course I always big up our partners, Man's Audio Visual, because they do all our flyers, our videos, our promotional material, and you see the quality of it. Um, I'm pretty sure they did that video that you just saw with Flying Grapple 3, and go out on a limb and say that they did that. So check them out for your work, from simple as designing your business card all the way up to full-fledged production. But welcome back, folks. After the break, my guest tonight is Mr. Shekhem. I probably shouldn't say Mr. because Mr. doesn't fit in it, but it's okay. It'll take a little while to break some of these habits that have been drummed into us. But we're speaking about Africa and Africans, especially outside of Africa, connecting with Africans who still live on the continent, as in Pan-Africanism. And he has given us his story of how he evolved, that journey, the significance of Rastafarism, the significance of studying the religion of Egypt, the traditions of Africans, the traditions of Egypt, and how it has informed the person that he is now, who now is looking back and saying, okay, maybe I was put in the right place at the right time. So I learned some of these things, but there are thousands of us, millions of us that don't get that opportunity. So he's taking it upon himself to go out to schools and to organizations and to have lectures and discussions and education sessions about Africa and the past, the awareness of where we are currently, and the aspiration of what we can achieve if we are deliberate and aware and conscious of who we are. So, welcome after the break. Again, I'm going to give you the opportunity to just talk a little bit about your work in the whole area of educating our folks and other people too about who we are as African, in 2024, whose shoulders are we standing on? and how we're going to stretch a hand back and pull our kids and hoist them even higher than we are currently.
Sure. I can't stress enough the need to get into history and understand the what we gave the world. This idea that we gave the world nothing, what Europeans want to go out there, they're still trying to this day say that Egypt was not an African civilization. We get all of that stuff. What I do is that I've been into prisons to do what we call personal development programs for inmates. Most of them, 90%, 99% of them are black young men. Most of them are young men who, for whatever reason, found themselves on the wrong side of the law. So they're in prison. So I go in there and I share history as a way for personal development. What did we do historically that enabled us to build the great civilizations that we did, right? Build pyramids, all those kind of things, which by the way, they can't do today. Even if they try with all of their cranes and so, they can't build a pyramid today. So the question then becomes, what did we do back then that enabled us to do the things that we did? We had we had a civilization for over 10,000 years. There was no Christianity around. There was no Islam around, because those are young religions. Christianity only goes back 6,000 years. Islam is only about 1,500 years old. And one of the things I focus on is, I don't focus on what people think they say. I focus on what actually took place. So people can think whatever they want, but it's like the Greeks. The Greeks, when you talk about the Greeks will tell you where they got all their stuff from. People nowadays will want to say, they think the Greeks got it from here, they think it from there. No, the Greeks said this is where we got it from. So what I do is that I use our history and I go into schools, and I teach them to be proud of the history that we have and what we did as kings and queens. I mean, when you go back in, when I sit down and I say, for example, in one session I did last year for Black History Month, I might be back at the school again this year, over here, that Queen Charlotte Sophia, as an example, was a Black woman. Queen Charlotte Sophia was a Black queen. She was married to King George III. Was it Edward? I think it's King George III she was married to. And she was the mother of Queen Victoria. Who was Queen Victoria? Queen Victoria was a mother of the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother was a mother of the Queen that just died in England recently. But she was a Black queen. When you look at the photos, when you look at her descriptions, they were a Black queen. There's another queen called Queen Philippa of Hainault. I have a book called The Plantagenets. And during that time, I opened the book. I went to find this book, and they describe Queen Philippa, part of the royal house in the UK, and describe her as a swarthy. Swarthy meant Black woman. That's what swarthy meant in those days. And Europe is littered with examples of dukes and duchesses, and there was a Black king of Poland nobody talks about. Is he? A Black king of Poland. He's described in the books. And if you don't go and search out these books, what they do is that later on, what the Europeans do, when they paint them, they whiten the skin, you see? But they don't, so to put you off the scent, they whiten the skin. But we found out through research, in actual fact, these were Black people. Way, way, way before slavery even took place, you had these people intermingling in African societies. They're littered all over Europe, right? You wouldn't think it. When you think of Europe now, you wouldn't think it, right? But they're littered all over Europe. So I go in schools and I write a program called History for Personal Development. And I use that as part of a platform. Because my thing is that we have to ensure that our children understand their history very, very well. So no matter what anybody says to them, they know their history. So that's the foundation. The foundation is understanding that history. Once you understand that history and we teach them that history, then from then anything is, because they're the next generation coming up. And as we say, what Marcus Garvey said, if you don't know history, you don't know where you're coming from.
Right.
We've had enough of our history taken away from us, hidden in libraries, hidden in books, put underground so nobody can find it. And all sorts of other stuff has been written about us. Right. But what happened is the truth has this habit of coming up when it's ready. And right now we're finding so much more. So that's what I do.
That's what I do
lectures and talks I've done prisons, I've done colleges, I've done schools, and that's what I do.
Right. Because what folks have to understand is that racism as we know it which tries to teach the inferiority of black people,
Hmm.
was invented to justify the enslavement of Africans.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
because if we are going to enslave a person to avoid persons from having sympathy for that person as a victim, is to paint that person as not being human, being subhuman. And
It's
because we were used to having beasts of burden, oxen and
yes.
donkeys and horses and the different beasts of burden that so if we are going to enslave a person, we have to make our society see that person as a beast of burden, not as a fellow human being.
Listen,
And
it's yeah.
mhm. Go ahead.
Listen, it's just amazing that this man comes in, completely tries to erase our history, takes over everything. He has never, you can't name me one civilization, not one in the history of mankind, that the European man has made by his own smarts and his own intelligence. Not one, right? Everything he's done is through conquest, through pillage, through rape, through murder, through stealing, every single thing he's done, right? Where we had, historically, we had 6 civilizations. And from there, the world spread. 6 African civilizations. We had Elam, Sumer, Canaan, Kemet or Egypt, Kush and Indus Kush, right? Ethiopia, Indus Kush, and India, and so on. Where Iran and Iraq is now, you've got Canaan, Sumer, Elam, you've got those areas there.
Mhm.
And it's from their civilization spread. He deliberately debunks that, says we did nothing, and puts himself in place. So it's very important for him to be able to do that. But we can reclaim all of that, right? History, that's why I said to people, always read history alongside everything else. You read history alongside religion, then you'll see where things came from. If you look at Christianity very carefully and the Bible, when you look at the Bible very carefully, and then I'll give you one example, the angels, as an example. The angels in the Bible, Hanael, Raphael, when you study them very carefully, where did they come from? They came from the ancient Egyptian tradition, but they just renamed it something else because the Bible came out of the Hebrew language. The Hebrew language came out of the Canaanite language. In Canaan, the word El means God. So Hanael, Raphael, Mikael is God of. So that's where it came from. That's where they took it from. So they took it from an African civilization, put it into their Bible, and call it angels. So that's just one example of what they done. And then obviously, as you say, to justify slavery and so on, they had to do stuff to make us look so bad. Whereas there was a time when historians wrote exactly what they saw.
Right.
They wrote the truth about what they saw. One good example is a French gentleman called Champollion, who wrote a book, Ruins of Empires. And in the book, he talks about the role of black people and so on and so on and so on. But he couldn't read English. So when he sent the book to publish, the publishers scrubbed out all the references to black. We didn't realize it until later on. He got a book of, hold on a minute, there's all these gaps in my book. What happened here? To find out, they took out all the references to black in the man's book. in order for them not to realize that they
Not
were
to
black.
acknowledge, yeah.
So
I mean, even right now, as we speak, Texas is trying to get rid. The United States is trying to get rid of history about slavery and black people in
that's just so
America.
disgraceful. That is just so disgraceful to want to do that to people, and then
they're
to want to
actively
say,
doing it. They're passing laws and rules and trying to get those work out of the schools and
well,
firing teachers who insist on teaching it. That's going on right now.
well, that is why the mission that I'm on, and not just me, and none of the stuff I'm talking about come from me, by the way. I'm just learning from other people who taught me, right? I'm not no guru who suddenly came up with this idea. Clearly not, right? I'm just learning from other people. So that's why I produced this coloring book to start the process of educating our children, right? And then making sure, so even if they decide to take it off the curriculum, we know the history.
Right. Let's talk about the coloring book a bit, because
Sure.
that's what brought this conversation into focus.
Sure.
Because you've produced and released a coloring book that's intended for young kids. Well, grown people can do it too, because sometimes you sit down and you, instead of doing Sudoku, you can color.
Yes.
So it's good for adults, it's good for seniors, and it's certainly good for young children. But while you are coloring, you're learning about
Yes.
Africans. Tell
Yes.
us, expand on that a bit. What
Well,
is it?
basically, this is the book here, by the way. This is the book. Right? It's available on Amazon.
Mhm.
And
Hold it up
I
again.
was
Let's make sure we see the title properly. Okay. Okay.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in
Coloring.
conversation with my partner, and she said to me, "There's not a lot of resources for young boys, young black boys in the UK. Can you put, what can you think you can do about it?" So I came up with the idea of doing a coloring book. So what I did was that I sat down, looking at what I'd want to do with it, and I decided to not focus on the US historically in terms of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. We get that all the time. Most coloring books online, they'll have those black coloring books, they'll have those people in it. I focus my attention on aspects of our history that is not well known. They're
Right.
there, but they're not well known. So I focus on Africa, the Caribbean, and Black Europe.
Mhm.
There's a lot of black people in Europe who were kings and queens and dukes and duchesses and so on that we don't know about. For example, there's a guy called Chevalier de Saint George, Joseph Boulogne. Joseph Boulogne was from Guadeloupe. He was mixed race from Guadeloupe, and he ended up being a terrific swordsman. He fought. He was there during when Napoleon was fighting his wars and so on. So he's a terrific swordsman. People don't know much about him. He was a gentleman. So I've got people like him in the book. I've got people like I've even got Derek Walcott in the book. Now, why have I put the Caribbean people in this? Because in the US, they don't know too much about that side of the history. You see, so I'm focusing on an area of history that there are some that's known, but some that's not so well known, right? Giants in our community who did massive work from a Pan-African perspective, right? But we just don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an easy coloring book, right? And as there's a list of who they are, and the whole idea is that the parent gets the book, they will then sit down with their child coloring the book, and then the name of the person will be there, and they'll just say, "Oh, let's go and research Chevalier de Saint George. Just find out more about what he did. Let's go and research Fela Kuti from the Nigerian musician. There's more about him." So the idea is to generate conversation. It's not just coloring, conversation, discussion, and further research and further understanding of who these young people are. So this one is targeting young people, young boys aged 6 to 11. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a girls' book, which should be out by November. I'm doing a girls' version that should be out by then. But so that's what prompted me to actually bring out this book and to really start the process of talking. Because I used to be a youth worker, and I spent a lot of time as a youth worker doing history and culture. So this is just an extension of that, this coloring book.
Right, and so it's basically let's call them heroes as a blanket word.
Yes.
To cover everybody, because you have musicians, you have artists, you have warriors,
yes,
and royalty, and also let's call them heroes, black heroes, but not your typical black heroes that they have in the media. Like you said, it's folks that are just as interesting, maybe even more interesting, because of the fact that they upscale.
Yes.
And so you learn about them, and you can encourage and say, okay, so my child likes art, and she finds out there's an artist in there. Go research that. Your child might be in martial arts classes, and there's a swordsman in there. Go research a little bit more about that particular swordsman.
Well, in that particular regard, when you talk about that, if I use that as an example, it's not in this particular book yet, but you think about the swordsman who started the samurai in Japan. He was a black man.
He was a black man.
He was a black man. There's a film coming out on him actually very soon. There's a film coming out on him very soon. He's a black man who started the whole samurai tradition in Japan. That's why in Japan they say, if you to be a samurai, you must have one drop of black blood in you, because they know where it came from. He was a black man who started it off. The Shaolin monks how did the Shaolin monks start when they started doing all their fantastic feats, breaking metal on their head and lying on steel and pokers and stuff like that? It was an African man called Dhammapada who went and taught them. You see, these are things that we don't know. You see,
Right. No
so
idea, right?
no, they don't. People don't know.
Yeah.
But when you dig into the history, it's there. You have to be diligent and go and search for what you want and
Mhm.
find it. Other because remember, our conquerors are never going to tell us this. They've hidden
Right.
it so that we don't know.
Right.
You see, so we have to go and find it.
And so in also in keeping with the awareness, you also have what you call wearable art,
Oh yes,
which is clothing that has some kind of conscious, some kind of art written on it, or the
yes,
graphics. Yeah, talk
yes.
about that as well.
Well, that's another area again. Part history, part social consciousness. For example, I've got one shirt that talks about our lives mattered, and basically, it's listing all of the men and women who have been killed by police in America. So it calls Our Lives Mattered. I got that as an example. I've got another one. I was doing a research on history on music the other day. Do you know 95% of all music that was created, as far as I'm concerned, on this planet came from black people?
I'm not surprised.
95%. Listen to me. Listen, there's so many. So I got a
Even,
shirt that,
even what we call classical.
yeah, listen to me. Remember, we had not Mozart, he's in my book.
Beethoven.
Beethoven,
Beethoven.
right? George, there's a guy called George Bridgetower. If you see his features, he's from I think he's from Italy, one of them places there. He was a black guy who influenced Mozart, right? Then you've got Joseph Ballon was also a musician as well, right? He's in there. People don't know these things. So when you look at the music genres, we've brought forth 95% of the music on the planet, right? Right. I think Europeans would be hard pressed to name one, maybe heavy metal. They'd be hard pressed to name one. Right, even rock and roll in America, which they attribute to King of Elvis. Rock and roll was not Elvis.
Country and Western as well.
Country and Western was what we are the one that brought that together. So I got a shirt that says the music makes the world go round. It's a black thing, and I got a record disc with all the different songs that music genres that we've come up with. You know, I've got stuff that, and it's wearable art for the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
People who understand. So I'm using art as a way of teaching young people history, teaching adults history, because I'm an artist. That's why I started off as an artist, you see, and that's what I do. So I've got my a line of clothing under Nefographics. You know, it's got those types of slogans on there and imagery. I've got stuff dedicated to women, black women who are fantastic. You know, I mean, when you look at history and you look at some of the stuff that black women did in the Caribbean, in Haiti, the Haiti Revolution. They talk about Dessalines, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint, and Boukman, but they don't talk about the women who were the cornerstone of Haitian Revolution. Victoria Montu, who was a Dahomey warrior in Dahomey, which is now Benin. She was captured as a slave and brought to Haiti, you see, and they went around burning down slave plantations. You see, Victoria Montu and a number of others, which is coming out in the book that I'm doing now for the girls. That side of the history is being spoken about. Yeah.
Right. So the book that you have, it can be found on Amazon, both
It's
UK
on Amazon
and US Amazon.
That's correct.
What
yes.
do they search for? What's the search for the book?
They have to. I have a link which I can send you. But when they go in, if they put in Nefographics into the search engine, or they put my first name Nafaunkh into the search engine for the history book, it will come up.
Nafaunkh. So Nefographics is NEFER graphics.
Yep. Nefographics.
If you go to Amazon and you search for Nefographics, that book should come up.
It will come up. It will come up.
So folks, I encourage you to get the book. Get your young people rotated and looking in that correct direction from early, and for us too. And of course, we know that more and more we are living longer, we get retired, and we're home with time on our hands. You may know some people like that. Get a book for them. And after you get the book for them, then you have conversations about it. You can get more storybooks about them. I'm sure they will find fascinating, and will probably jog memories and tremendous conversations about experiences from the earlier years and so on. I think it's wonderful work. I haven't gotten my copy as yet, but I'm going to. So go on to Amazon and look for Nefographics, and you will find the coloring book that from Shekhem Nafaunkh that is intended. The only one that he has out now is written with boys in mind, but there's no reason why girls cannot have it. And he's currently working on the one that's targeted at girls. There's no reason boys cannot get that one too. And
Yeah,
maybe you can think of doing one for our seniors, folks
I
who
am.
are
I've
retired.
got. Yeah, well, it's going to be at least a 6-part series that I'm working on. There will be one for seniors as well. But in the Amazon, they got to type in Nefaunkh, not Nefographics, Nefaunkh. If they type in
Nefaunkh.
Nefaunkh, it will come up.
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
Nefaunkh.
it'll come up.
Nafaunkh.
Nafaunkh.
All right. Nafaunkh.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah, it's
come up.
right here.
You see?
You will find it. And if you can't find it, drop me a line, drop me a WhatsApp text, any kind of text, and I'll give it to you. But
Yeah.
and we'll put it in the chat as well. We are flat out of time. That's the hour on us.
All
I'm
right.
going to give you the opportunity to close up the conversation by just recapping and really talking again about your, I don't call it a mission, but your work that you are obviously very passionate about.
Absolutely.
And what, as we talk about the past, we talk about the present. What do you see as aspirational for Africans?
I think that our time as a people across the world, right, across the world, and I'm not a Nostradamus or anything of that nature, but I think the time has come where if we continue to instill our history, go back to the history, go back to the culture, and we continue to spread that amongst ourselves and understand look at what's going on in Africa and so on, right? There's movements being made over there, right? But key thing about all of this is to capture our children's imagination, and by capturing our children's imagination with history and culture, I think we're in good stead. In the scheme of things, I think Marcus Garvey might have said, in the scheme of things, we lost our place, but in the scheme of things, we will regain it. We will come up and rise as a people. I'm getting ready to head back home to Dominica, and I've got to find a way of doing this. It might be by radio, I don't know yet, but I've got to figure out a way which I've got to do this in the Caribbean as well. You see, but we have the door is opening up for us to find the things that we need in order to like ourselves, because the key thing about Pan-African is that you have to love and respect the culture and who you are. If you don't do that, it's not going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our children are bombarded with all kinds of stuff deliberately in order to keep them away from the scent, to keep them off the path that we're trying to create for them. And so we see what's going on, we understand what's going on, and we understand who is doing it and why they're doing it. You see, but we have to come out of that and create our own reality, and that can happen for us. And it will happen for us. There's no question about it.
Right, and that's a good place to leave it. Awareness, not just awareness, but awareness that's going to result in us understanding that we have every reason to be proud of who we are.
Absolutely.
That's where it starts. And so I want to thank you for the work that you do. I want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me. And as you talk about moving back to the Caribbean and looking for a platform to continue your work, let's see. Talk to us, talk to Sam. Let's see what is possible in terms of TDN Media being available for that purpose.
Fantastic. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, schoolmate. Good to see you.
All right. Good to see you.
Take care, man.
Take care.
Nice one.
All right.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye.
Mm-hmm. Bye. Well, folks, there you have it. I promised you that it was going to be a wonderful conversation. My old, well, we're not old, we're just mature. But my schoolmate from secondary school, we went to grammar school in the 80s. And he's gone on into the UK, made a life and a career for himself, and educated himself, and is now sharing his knowledge and his passion and his learning. And of course, just putting the information out there in front of you, just like him, he got the information and he made decisions based on that. There's no harm in getting the information yourself and deciding how you're going to utilize and implement that information. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Give us a like on Facebook and Instagram. You can find Shekhem's work, or you can follow him on TikTok. You can follow him on Instagram. It's Nefa Graphics. On Instagram, it's Nefa underscore graphics. And on TikTok, it's just at Nefa Graphics. So have a good Wednesday evening and the remainder of your week as well. And whatever it is that you're celebrating, congratulations. If you're going through a little bit of challenging time, stay strong, stay grounded, stay aware, stay conscious. And we'll do this again next week, Wednesday, with another episode of This Week in Interview. Good night, everyone.